Hello everybody, my name's James, and for the benefit of those listening back to the audio, you're listening to Ask James, my regular YouTube live stream where I welcome questions from the YouTube community on anything football related. To timestamp this, it's just gone past 4 p.m. UK time on Thursday, October the 30th. Half hour later than planned, but I'll blame Lumo for having my train back from Newcastle delayed. I got nothing specific to announce. I've got a feeling I know what might come up in the questions, so I'm going to get into them. As per usual, questions will be answered in order of submission. Repeat/similar questions may well be skipped. They'll be answered in order of submission up till around about 5 p.m. UK time. Dan's first says, we all think Arsenal are going to win the league, but does the fact they are 17th for open play goals give you any hope that set pieces goals could dry up? No, because as discussed on Monday's podcast, I think Arsenal have a way to go in terms of, like, I can see there'll be improvement in them. The only goal I've literally seen from last night was one of Arsenal's, and it's a great team goal. So I think once people like Eze and Gyökeres are integrated better into the system, the likes of Havertz, Odegaard, Madueke return. No, Dan, I haven't got any hope. Unfortunately, I think they're the best team in the league by a distance. Chris Bruce says, I've fixed my biggest issue. I've fixed my biggest issue. Foden, Reinders, Gyökeres for Mateta, Saka and Minter, all for free. Listening to Clash of the Correspondents and wondering whether to do VVD to Munoz, also for free. So I'm a VVD owner. I can go to Munoz. I've got 2 free transfers, 0.2 in the bank. João Pedro to Mateta is a possibility. Van Dijk to Munoz is a possibility. Remember, I'm very short term here as I'll be wildcarding soon. So Fernandes to Sarr and then Dewsbury Hall up to something like Rice or Minter is another way to go, or potentially even Konsa up to Munoz as part of that, and keep VVD, play back 4 this week. Maybe it's back 3 next week. A few different ideas in mind, and I've not come to any conclusion yet. I think the consciousness on selling Virgil van Dijk would be that Liverpool's fixtures are insane from game week 12 onwards, and as we approach December, having a player like Virgil van Dijk, who you know every single week, no matter what, he's going to play in the Premier League for Liverpool, isn't something that necessarily should be overlooked. He is by far the leader in the Premier League for clearances. Teams are going way more direct against Liverpool. That's well documented. He's going to be in and around the DEFCONs on a semi-regular basis. If they sort themselves out, you've got a potential monster there. Now, for me, I'm looking to take him out, possibly, but I want him on that wild card. So it's just a case of me making a short-term decision. Maybe don't want this week, don't want a Manchester City next week. Very happy to own afterwards. So if you've used your wild card, I'd be quite tempted to hold on to him at this moment personally. But the appeal of Munoz is there for me as well. I completely get that, Chris. AP UK says, are you still on wildcard 13 strategy? I've only used my triple captain so far. So what would you say is the optimal chip strategy at the moment? I don't like optimal because it's so team dependent. I am leaning more now to wildcarding in game week 12. I mentioned it briefly on Monday, and I did a piece for our advanced tier patrons on Tuesday where I detailed the reasons why I was now strongly considering that. And it's something that was mentioned to other people earlier in the season, particularly about Liverpool's good swing back into game week 12. Reasons for now considering it is I thought I would have more Arsenal coverage, and I may well start this game. We can be up to 3 Arsenal. But I definitely thought I'd have more Chelsea. Now, I might land in game week 11 with 2 Chelsea, but I might land in game week 11 with no Chelsea. I haven't made my decisions yet for this week. I won't buy Chelsea this week, but I could do in game week 11. Now, if I've got no Chelsea, and I'm not too fussed about the Arsenal in the sense that Gabriel would be a certainty to stay for me now, whereas I think original wildcard plan in 13 would have been like, he's probably no Arsenal, but Gabriel wouldn't go anywhere for me as at least a minimum to have some skin on it. So If I've got less Chelsea coverage, I'm not really losing out on the Burnley fixture. The other thing that's really kind of nagging at me is I thought part of the plan with game week 13 in pre-season was basically there were four teams that really come into really good fixtures in and around there. Liverpool, City, Newcastle and Manchester United. Now, weirdly, bizarrely, Manchester United is the team that actually appeals the most, I think, for fantasy at this moment. And I'm not convinced I'm going to have too much Newcastle and Man City. And one of the reasons today for 13 is obviously to play each other in 12. That meant keeping Chelsea Arsenal players, sell the Chelsea Arsenal players, 13, put the Newcastle City players in. I can't see me wanting much of it from Newcastle Man City. And if I want Liverpool and Manchester United, then actually it's better to go a week earlier in game week 12. They have Nottingham Forest and Everton at home respectively. So I'm leaning towards game week 12 now. That decision has not been made yet. And nothing I do from a transfer perspective this week is going to impact 12 or 13 because essentially the only two teams I'm looking at this weekend are Arsenal, Crystal Palace. There is a small chance I look at Brighton, but it's only really Arsenal, Crystal Palace players that I'm looking at this week. So it doesn't make a difference for me to have to make that decision now. I will certainly make that decision next week before the game week 11 deadline comes around. James Wright says, in terms of your strategy, AP though, like again, it's team dependent, isn't it? Triple captaincy, Haaland 13, 15 or 17. Bench boost, ideally now 11 or I think possibly 17, just because I think it will be the easiest in terms of dealing with rotation. I've shouted that week a number of times. Free hit is team dependent. Wild card, I don't think there's much point in going much later than game week 13. James Wright says, have three free transfers. Would you bin Van Dijk or James for Gabriel this week? Would you do Bowen to Voltemade, Pickford to Raya? I have already wildcarded. So Gabriel, yes, I'd be quite happy to get that in for Van Dijk and get it done personally. That's different to the previous one because I just think you want Gabriel long term and there's no reason not to want it. It's the outstanding defender in the game and I don't think that will change as the season progresses as long as he stays fit. Bowen to Voltemade, I get the appeal. I don't like selling one player when they're about to play another. You know the consequence of that. He's 1-0 West Ham Bowen scores, but probably not. So I wouldn't rush to get rid of Bowen across the next two. Personally, I've got Bowen and I think it's very unlikely I'm going to sell him this week. So that would be a potential move to me. That's not under consideration. In terms of Pickford to Raya, I think Pickford is fine to have. We've been here before, haven't we? Oh, it's been a bit disappointing and then bang, bang, bang. The next couple of fixtures are okay. I think even the little spell after that 12 to 14 is not horrendous for Everton. There's a particular period of two fixtures, 16 and 17, that looks really ugly. But I've said this a few times. You hit game week 18, Everton shoot right to the top of my ticker. And I can't help thinking with Raya, he'll probably be the highest scoring goalkeeper in the game. It's fine. But whether you're going to get the value of that in terms of 1 million more than others, or even some of the guys like Pope in that bracket, I'm not convinced personally. It doesn't feel the best usage of an Arsenal player to me personally. So Pickford to Raya would be a no for me. Bowen to Voltemade, I understand, but it's not on the agenda for me. Priority from that would be to put Gabriel in the team, James. Harry Baker says, yes, James, thoughts on free transfers for Gyökeres, Konate, Paquetá to Thiago, Timber and Bumo? Or would you buy Sarr over Bumo? Already own Mateta, Saka, Gabriel. Cheers. No, if I had the availability to go Bumo, I would go there. If it's just a straight choice between Bumo and Sarr, I would go for Bumo at this stage. Just keep in mind, I presume both players will go to AFCON, but I think there's more than enough game weeks in between now and then that it's still fine to be picking these guys up over the next couple of weeks. You'll have all the transfers in 16 to deal with it as well. Thiago, nice pickup. I think he'll be really consistent. As I've said, he's very much on radar for me over forthcoming weeks. Palace away doesn't feel like a dive-in moment, though, I must say. Konate is an absolute, get shot of that, I think. Gyökeres, I get it. It enables it. I'll tell you now as the spoiler, we had to record the Hall or Blank, and by the way, the people I keep backing for Halls and not hauling, but Gyökeres is my tip for player to haul this weekend. I wouldn't be getting rid. I know I keep saying that every week, and I know he keeps blanking every week, but this one more week, no, I don't think there's anything if I owned him that I'd be going from. Suj still owns. I don't think Suj would be selling him, so I wouldn't be keen on binning Gyökeres this week, so I think there's big haul potential in that. Simon Baker says, hey James, is Ndiaye to Sarr worth it? Thinking wait to 12 and do Ndiaye to Szoboszlai. Already have Matt and Lacroix, other fires to fight to Pedro, Reinders, Stack. Or should I be aggressive? Rank poor, 3.4. Don't worry about the rank at this stage, buddy. Is Ndiaye to Sarr worth it? Not sure it is. There's probably someone like Illiman and Die if you want. It's not a problem. It's a decent asset. But he is capable of picking up defcons now and again as well. He's on the edge of it even when he doesn't. So there's a few different avenues to points. It also means that if he returns, he really returns for you. So I wouldn't be desperate to move that on. I think you've mentioned about making that move in 12, and I think that's still absolutely fine. Szoboszlai is an intriguing one. I don't know if I'd be setting myself up to definitely go there over that period of game, which I think he's been one of Liverpool's better performers recently. I know he's, in terms of the DEFCON stuff, he's kind of being a bit overlooked at the moment, but I do think there's quite a bit of that in terms of his positioning has changed. I note this morning that Frimpong's out for 6 weeks. In years gone by, we'd have all dived into Conor Bradley at 5 million, but I don't think any of us want to do that at the moment. But that could be an intriguing one for the Christmas period, maybe. Frimpong's possibly going to be returning just around about the period that Salah goes, isn't he? So Conor Bradley could be quite good for a sustained period here, but just doesn't feel worth it without the DEFCON perspective of that personally. João Pedro, I don't think it's a desperate. I get the frustrations. Next two, well, in fact, all of the next 3 are okay, but there were 2 fixtures afterwards. I suppose with João Pedro, I can't look at this way and not think João Pedro to Mateta is a good move. Like I do, but do I want to deal with other things more? Reinders, I think now is possibly, it's look to move on probably. I think because you definitely won't want to look at that Liverpool Newcastle afterwards, I don't think. Stack is going to be problematic, I think, so I don't think there's any guarantee he's going to get back in that lead side. I thought Tanaka played quite well on Friday night. So I would probably want to deal with those guys first. I don't know if Simon's something worth like Stack to King. And I think with the injuries Fulham have picked up this week, I do think Josh King will play this week. There's every chance I'm going to start him. Stack to Josh King might allow you Reinders up to Minter, for example. Consider that sort of thing. Dan says, I can't visualise how Liverpool can be successful with Salah and Wirtz as part of a front 4 off the ball. Wirtz with Germany and Leverkusen, at Leverkusen, Wirtz as a front 3. Bow to your knowledge, how can you see it working? I think it's diamond for Liverpool personally. It's a shame that Frimpong's injured from that perspective, because I think that Liverpool have invested in Frimpong. Kerkez, you want to use them and begin to get the best out of them. Frimpong's got to wait. Kerkez has been abysmal recently, really has. He just doesn't fit. Now, I know there's a very good footballer in there, so it will probably settle down. So Andy Robertson, a long time to settle down at Liverpool. And I do think Milos Kerkez will do well. But the further away he is from your defensive goal, probably the better for you. They have fullbacks who can operate that. And have narrow inside them. I think it's probably split forwards for Liverpool. So I think it's a midfield 3 of similar to what we saw last year, Gravenberch, Szoboszlai and McAllister, and there's not as much onus for them to be in the kind of the front line. They stay deeper, particularly Gravenberch extremely deep, probably sit into a back 3 and build up, and Szoboszlai and McAllister almost act like your pivots in front of that, and you let the rest go. Wirtz behind the front 2 of Isak left split, Salah right split, rotates with Ekateko. That feels like the solution for me at the moment, personally. I don't think Arne Slot will go down that route. So, yes, there are going to continue to be teething problems with Liverpool. It is going to take a while for these guys to integrate in, but Liverpool have invested heavily in a lot of players. They are going to want to make these players work. I don't deem like I've not seen Verts as a failure, Isak's a failure. I don't even say Kirkhead's a failure. Like, I think they'll get something out of it in time. Chris Bruce says, where do you think Keith Andrews would have to finish to win Manager of the Year? To win Manager of the Year, like 5th or 6th, mate, I think, to win Manager of the Year. He's done exceptionally well, but he's also walked into an environment at Brentford that was very, very stable. Did Nuno win Manager of the Year last year as a kind of like a comparison? So he'd have to finish very, very high, wouldn't he? Prashant Hajani says, hi, James. I have 3 free transfers and 0.7 in the bank. I feel absolutely handcuffed by Gordon and Gyökeres this game week. And with 4 free transfer next week, do you think it's better to prioritise Bumo or Mateta? From a priority perspective, it's Palace versus Manchester United. I know I just said Bumo over Sarr, but I think if we're going Bumo versus Mateta, probably more Mateta. But I mean, Gordon's playing West Ham and Gyökeres is playing Burnley. Need versus want is the old discussion we used to have in Sky. Now, Palace are playing a Brentford side that are doing pretty well at the moment. I don't know if we've all just completely overlooking that. I agree Palace are walking into a great set of fixtures now. But Brentford have done well recently. I don't know. Do we need to force that? If I had Gyökeres, I'd not be selling him this week. And I think if I had Andy Gordon, I wouldn't be selling him this week either. Chris says, is triple captain Gabriel at some point next 2 game weeks viable, or wait until Haaland versus Leeds? I would be using it on Haaland, mate. Jean-Luc says, hi, James. 5 free transfers. Thinking Casado to Minter this week, then Gyökeres to Voltamade and Rangers to Sarr next week. Worth a punt, no Saka. If you're going Brighton, timing is now. I would add the caution onto that that Leeds' defensive underlying numbers are pretty good. I had a look earlier in the week. I'm surprised. I mean, the third, I think, for expected goals conceded. But Minter's ticking over really nicely. I think he's fine. If you've got to a position where you're like, nah, actually, I don't really want Casado long term. It's not for me. And that's fine if you've come to that conclusion. Then yes, I don't mind that. And your set of your following transfers, I quite like. Jack and Twistle says, hi, James. Need VVD advice. Me too, by the way. On triple Arsenal and Palace, defense of Raya, Gabriel, Senesi, Munoz, VVD and Anderson. VVD to Burn/Timber via Gyökeres down next week, or keep Probs not Timber because of blank. Yeah, we'll get onto that. Nothing wrong with going VVD to Timber, mate. Nothing wrong with that at all. I'm not going to give you any reason not to go for Virgil van Dijk to Julian Timber, mate. Dan says, would you sell VVD or Tarkowski? No wildcard, bringing in Palace defence. So no wildcards. Again, I've been quite tempted to lock that up in a position where, like, playing VVD this week, home fixture's still fine. I've rotated the whole team heavily last night, so that may help in terms of just a bit of R&R. And you probably don't want to play at City, but then every fixture afterwards is fine. Now, again, they've got to improve because otherwise he's not worth it. But if they do, you've got a monster there. And I'm conscious of that. Like I said, if I take him out, I want to put him back in on wildcard possibly. So I'd probably think... But Tarkowski's fine this week as well. You want to go Palace defence. I get you want to go now. I'd be very, very tempted, Dan. I get to want the Palace, a little bit like what I just said. I'd be very tempted, Dan, just to leave that be for this week and see how you feel about it this time next week. Cole Slipper says, hi, James. What's your thoughts on Chow as a player? I've seen him last night. Yeah, very good. Very good. Our Newcastle patrons have been pretty keen to point out to anyone that listened that he's been exceptional, actually. And yeah, looks very good last night. Would be more comfortable if he had a left footer alongside him last night. But that's fine as a one-off. But yeah, composed, strong, physical, all the kind of attributes you'd want in a good centre-back in the Premier League. So yeah, very good. And I think if there's a criticism of Newcastle defensively, it might be that on occasion it lacks for athleticism, and he adds a layer to that. So yeah, good. Ilan Melchior says, hi, James. Would you play Semenyo or Reinders? I would play Semenyo. He's got, I don't know, about 20 points more than any other midfielder in the game at the moment. And I'll remind you what he scored at Liverpool in game week 1. If the game does become a transitional show, he can expose. He can expose. Now, I don't expect him to, by the way, but I would be playing Semenyo. Cole Sliffer says, would you start Dubravka or Petrovic this game week? I know, not a great choice. Thanks. Probably Dubravka. Just on the volume of shots that Burnley are giving up. So in the unlikely circumstance where Arsenal just had a kind of game at Burnley in the similar to what Liverpool did in game week 4, whole potential. So yeah, probably Dubravka. I wouldn't piss about with that, by the way, mate. Just, yeah, pick your poison and it'll be what it'll be this week, mate. Dan says, interesting your tactical thoughts on why Enzo is not 10 regularly. Even with Palmer, I felt like Palmer right, Enzo 10 looked better. Now Palmer injured, I assumed Enzo 10 every game, but no. So we can look at it, the Palmer aspects, and I agree with you, but what about the aspects of Casado's partner in terms of build-up? So we know Chelsea predominantly want to get to a 3-2-5 in build-up. That on occasion, which I don't think worked great for Palmer last year, was a 3-1-6. And we've also seen circumstances, say like the second half at Brentford, where Enzo Maresca adapted and went with a 2-2 build. Basically went 2-2-6. So what he wants to do alongside Casado is really relevant to that. So in a circumstance where, let's say, Cucurella's going into his hyper position and going into the front 5 from left back, then Enzo can end up sitting a bit deeper. Last week, it looked like Enzo drifted into the Palmer position, kind of right half space 10. Right? If you've got, say, a Reece James tucking into right back, or if Romeo Lavia starts, that's far more license to Enzo to go. So a lot of the solutions in terms of expectation on Enzo is more around what else is available. Also consider that there are circumstances here where João Pedro 10, like I said, if he wants to put Cucurella into a higher position, and if they've got another 9 like Gu or Delap in front of that, yeah, he's probably going to sit off deep on. So it's consequence of others. And I think with if you're just comparing Enzo and Palmer as players, Palmer, we know, exceptional qualities. Enzo's danger from a fancy perspective is in breaking into the box late. And even though it might not have been what you wanted positionally last week or in some of the other recent games, I still think you've seen elements, particularly in the 2 home games, Liverpool-Sunderland recently, where he's still able to go and box crash. And that's actually the best of him. So actually, if he's in the 10 position and he's starting a bit higher, I don't think that's advisable. He's not someone... Palmer is... He's like a space invader in the sense that his understanding of how to find space off the shoulder of, say, a number 6 is exceptional. I wouldn't put Enzo Fernandez in that bracket in terms of that, right? If you wanted Enzo as a 10, you want him joining in and facing forward. Palmer's quite comfortable with his back to goal and receiving on the half turn. So with Enzo, you want him facing it and joining in later. That's probably the biggest reason. But I think also it's coming down a lot to player availability at the moment as well. CM Punk 2310 says, start one of Rangers, Dewsbury Hall, or Senesi. Rangers, straightforward one, mate. I think for most people, Senesi will be a bench this week. Dewsbury Hall, I own. No confidence in that whatsoever. I'd started him last week, and even though we were playing my team, I said that before the game. No confidence in him as an asset. He's drifting far too far right at the moment to help with their build-up. Mr. Samuelville says, Strand Larson to Mateta and Pedro Porro to Keane, or Gyökeres to Mateta, Reinders to Sarr, and Porro to Timber from -4. Wildcard still in hand. Yeah, I can tell you firsthand the danger of selling Pedro Porro on a free transfer, never mind for a -4. So despite the fixtures, I wouldn't be doing that. Larson to Mateta, I've got no reason to tell you no. I prefer probably the Porro to Keane move from that perspective. Gyökeres may open back up for Arsenal later on. I would hold him this week. Sokan1 says, stack a transfer out, Anderson or Keenan Dewsbury Hall. Thank you for your excellent work. You're welcome. That's Elliot Anderson, I presume, off to spell him. Stack, as mentioned earlier, so I'm going to kind of skip, but yeah, I think he may struggle to get back in the team. There will be a little bit of rotation, particularly in forthcoming weeks for Leeds. Anderson or Dewsbury Hall, is that in terms of a start this week? Anderson is just a higher kind of floor, basically. Cloudy Sky Fantasy Football Show. Ian Parents in this afternoon, mate. Hope all is well. How would you schedule the festive fixtures when Christmas Day falls on a Thursday? And would it make any difference if there were only 3 rounds of Premier League, not 4? I'd tell you what I would do, Ian. And I don't know the schedule for next year, but I presume that adjusted international break next year, where there's 1 3-week break rather than 2 2-week breaks. I don't understand the not having a set of midweek games in August. I really don't, actually. We've done this for the last few years now, where we've got a set of midweek fixtures available between 1 and 2 or 2 and 3. And the only reason not to use it is because someone has Conference League first and second legs. So I don't see any reason when the Conference League starts later than the Europa League or not the Europa League, but it obviously has a week later than the Champions League. All you'd have to do is make sure you'd schedule. So say you was going to do game week 3 is between a weekend of 2 and 4 in August. Game week 3, you make sure Crystal Palace aren't playing a team that's in Europe in that set of fixtures, and it gets played during those first Champions League games. So they'd have a game in hand, they'd have a blank in like game week 3 and then a double in game week 5 or something. Like I don't know why we're stacking it so much when that availability in August is there and it's not being used. I don't understand that really. Christmas Day is a Thursday this year, isn't it, Ian? So our understanding is going to be 1 Boxing Day game, right? I think it would have worked better, truthfully, if we were probably in a situation where we had the weekend and then didn't have anything till, so Boxing Day till, say, the 29th. And then most of the teams played New Year's Day and then across probably Sunday the 4th, primarily. That would have probably been the way to do it, I think. But they've shoved it in and they're facing some complications now, aren't they? CM Punch 2310 says, heard you were considering wildcard 12. What needs to happen in order for you to choose between 12 and 13? No, nothing. It's just a final decision now. I'll skip that because I covered a little bit earlier on. So it's probably just a final decision on personnel. Yeah, if I want more Newcastle Man City than I feel like I do now, that's a big influence to 13. Also, if I ended up, for whatever reason, buying 2 Chelsea in 11, I'm okay, 1 more week maybe. FPL Gaza says, hi James, hope you enjoyed your visit to St James's Park last night. Did you manage to get a drink or 2 in town? Not much. We went out for something to eat. Went to the ground, drink before the game. We had a couple of bottles after the game as well. Nothing too serious. We're too old for all that, mate. It is one of my favourite places in the world, Newcastle. I've said that many, many times. You definitely, if you walked through the city centre after the game, which we did, would have definitely thought it was Saturday night rather than Wednesday night. What a tune, mate. What a tune. Elliot says, hi, James. Would you do Gyökeres, Reinders and Paquetá to Mateta and Ndiaye or Enzo and Minsa? Not eager to sell Gyökeres, but the midfielders are both problems, and this is the best way to make money for free transfers. So, can something wait there, right? So, Ndiaye and Enzo both away. Can you go Paquetá to Minter this week and just sit on the other 2 transfers an extra week? That's maybe what I'd be looking at. Harry Trimble says, hey James, plan to bench boost in 11, wildcard in 12 or 13. Bench boost would be goo. Oh God. Yeah. That's very dependent on probably minutes of players for Chelsea. I think they're in now Matty, aren't they? The Wednesday before they play Wolves. Goo, Dubravka, Joachim Anderson and Bijou. 2 free transfers in game week 11. Is it worth the 2 free transfers to improve the bench boost or keep them for later? So you've got every chance of minutes from Goo against Wolves. It's an okay fixture for Dubravka. It's an okay fixture for Bijou. And it's also an okay fixture for Anderson if he's available. Now, obviously, what Marco Silva says on Joachim Anderson is probably going to have quite a big bearing on this, I should imagine. I think it's an interesting dilemma, the idea of this is what bench boost does to you, right? It pins you in. Okay, so ultimately, Harry, there are other opportunities to use it, and you have a wild card that can potentially set for that. Okay. Are those 2 free transfers, as you quite rightly point out, better being used later on, or is it to be more aggressive with transfers that actually improve your 11? It's the psychological of, I don't want shit on my bench boost. Now, for me, if Anderson's probably available, it's enough reason to say, Harry, just get rid of it, because then you can set with cheaper shit, probably on the wild card. Maybe go like Bijou and Twanzebe with Dubravka, and a different foot. Maybe it's Krupi. I mean, you've gone pretty cheap in fairness anyway. Yeah, I think it's probably ultimately depends on what Marco Silva says, Harry. But I don't know, if like Anderson isn't going to be part of your 11 anyway, and you're quite comfortable with the rest of your team, I think there'd maybe be more power in using them later on. That said, you got 5 free transfers to nudge stuff around in 16. And as I've been saying for weeks, I think 17 is probably the one where you'll suffer the least concerns in terms of rotation, personally. James McDonough's plans was the wildcard 13, but I'm ahead of the curve with the likes of Gabriel, Calafiori, Saka, Bumo, Mateta, Gordon, Semenyo, Haaland. Few transfers I'd make, but only 3 or 4. Is it worth wildcard anyway? I'll wait. Yeah, I think it probably will be, James, because I think I've covered this a few times. When you look at, say, my 5-week rolling difficulty, if you look at, say, 13 to 17 and then, say, 17 to 21, the teams at the top of the ticker are still very similar. So I still think like there's enough reason to just fix the bits up. So I agree with you, James. It's weird. I almost feel like for the people who wildcarded between 6 and 8, because of various issues, underperforming City players, Saka and Palmer's availability, I don't feel like that group got the best of things. It's not to say people did badly. I'm just saying didn't probably get the best of the visualization that they had for it. And I don't think the crowd like us who are waiting later, I don't think we're going to get the best of it either, because there's a lot of that, James. I mean, I keep looking at that and thinking, well, if I buy Mateta and Munoz this week, that's 2 less transfers I'd have probably made on wildcard. Yet the only reason I think for me to wildcard this week would be for Crystal Palace. We'll just buy 2 of them now anyway. So, yeah, I agree with that, James. But I still think, I don't think beyond 13, I don't think there's going to be much reason personally, mate. Dazar9 says, hi, James. Is it worth triple captain Haaland this week? Bournemouth will attack Man City and can get caught on counter. And also while Haaland is in good form. I just think ultimately, and there's plenty of reasons to look at, Bournemouth conceding 4 at Liverpool, Mateta's XG against them. There's plenty of reasons to think it could be good. Personally, I would be waiting on one of them other opportunities that Haaland has. And if you ask me right now, the best of the lot really would look like West Ham in Game Week 17. There's no reason whatsoever to think Erling Haaland won't play that game. None whatsoever. So, it might be subject to what you want to do with other transfers and stuff. But I think if I still had it in pocket, the problem with 17 is, and I get it, it's so late that if something goes wrong there, you're scrambling. And obviously Salah's not like a get out for you at that point. But I do think there will be get outs in the sense of like a Manchester United player, as an example, might get you out of it as a worst case scenario at home to Wolves in 19. Like something will play like Fernandes or Bumo or something like that. So I think 17 personally. If I hadn't used it, I would not be using it this week personally. Bad Company says, hi James, are Mateta and Sarr being overrated for this week? I see people bringing in free Palace this week after a midweek game and a Brentford team that have shown they can frustrate. Yeah, I still think you get chances against Brentford. I kind of mentioned this earlier. Brentford from decent form at the moment. I think the answer probably sits somewhere in the middle. It's okay if you're sitting there thinking, I want to oppose them. And I also think it's okay there to be thinking, I want to steam into them. There's another home game the following week against the Brighton team who seems to never keep a clean sheet. Wolves away the week after. Like, fixtures are good. Glasner keeps playing them, so there isn't much suggestion of rotation at the moment. I think you can have either view on it, but I think ultimately you probably will want to get there. Chris Bruce says, only 1 so far. Come on, guys. Free content. All the best so far. Thanks, Chris. I think what Chris is trying to say is, can everyone smash a like? It doesn't cost anything. Smash a like. Hit the sub button. For those listening back to the podcast, if you're enjoying the audio, a 5-star review does go a really long way. Greg says, afternoon, James. Malik Chow continues to impress for 4.9. If not this week, which Newcastle fixture looks the best time to jump on? Game at 15, maybe? or 14, probably 14 Tottenham at home. It's probably dependent on what you want to sell. It's certainly one I wouldn't be looking at and thinking, oh, I've got to get there, or it's probably down to timing of what you want to sell more than anything, mate. Colin Johnson says, hi, James. Great content, mate. Play one of Roden, Reinders and Paquetá. Reinders, I think. Yeah, with fixtures, I think probably Reinders. Stephen Carr says, hi, James. Hope all is well. Play King or João Pedro. Oh, João Pedro. Yeah, straightforward. He'll play. Don't think there's much doubt about that. Probably as the 9 as well. The early indications are that Romero probably won't be back. And different type of opponent for Van der Ven and Danso to deal with to what they did, say, at Everton last week. And we couldn't say King's a certain starter. King scored a nice goal in midweek, but ultimately has not even scored in the Premier League yet. So straightforward one, that, mate. I've got both. There's no way I would play King over João Pedro. If I was genuinely in that position, I'd probably be bombing João Pedro out very quickly for a Mateta or a Voltemade if you felt that strongly. Cole Sliver says, yesterday was the first time I've seen Simmons in a live game. I thought was underwhelming. What's the Spurs fan view on him? Yeah, he struggled to, I don't want to say settle, doesn't feel right. Maybe he has settled very well. But yeah, disappointing. I think it's very fair to say. He had a nice little spell towards the end of the first half. I think he finds space quite well. I think it's been striking that the pace is way too quick for him at the moment, and it might develop. I'm certainly not like on cut your losses on him. I said in pre-season that I had concerns about him as a player and hadn't been that infused when I'd seen him previously. I definitely can tell that he does have a little bit of an X factor around him. And he's working hard. It's not like he's not putting the work in, but he does look quite slight and he looks quite slow at the moment. And in this league, generally, the combination of those two things will probably find you out. So he needs time. He needs time to adjust, and he's only going to develop by continuing to play, really. But yeah, what you say, Cole, is not wrong whatsoever. He very much has underwhelmed, and if anyone was still sitting there with him in their FPL team, that needs dealing with. Colin says, take a hit for Paquetá to Bumo, Voltemade to Croupier Jr., or Paquetá to Enzo and Voltemade to Thiago, or roll to do it next week. Why in the world, Colin, are you considering of selling Voltemade, or am I completely misunderstanding this question? There is no way I would sell him. They're playing West Ham, mate. No way. No. Just no on Bumo, right? There's no way I would sell Voltemade. Daz R9 says, James, who would pick between Donnarumma and Roast this week, and also Casado versus Xhaka? I think you really want to consider Daz if you want to be spending, 10.2-ish or whatever the price is on those two for goalkeepers, mate. Feels like way too much, personally. If you've got Donnarumma, then there ain't going to be many weeks you should be looking not playing, personally, really. If you're genuinely sitting there with that consideration, that needs dealing with, I think. The Donnarumma all day for me. I know Roves, his high-scoring keeper, has done well. You got Donnarumma in, to not play him at home to Bournemouth. If that's how you feel, mate, sell him for Dubravka. You've got 1.7 million to play with. Simon Baker says, James, I heard if you smash the like, then FPL Towers will give you 5 more free transfers. If Arsenal and Everton double in game week 16, surely this can't be true. You'll be getting the 5 free transfers either way in game week 16. I'm not sure you'd be getting a double. Simon Kurt says, I see a lot of people saving 5 transfers and making sideways moves. Do you think with a much easier format this season, we should be targeting short gains rather than holding on to transfers? Those who've been holding on to transfers have done so in part to deal with this period coming up of these next swings, Liverpool, City, Newcastle, Man United, etc., etc. So perfectly understand that, and I think if I'd used the wild card, I'd be sitting there right now thinking, bloody hell, yeah, probably want to hold on to stuff where I can. So I do think it's a narrative you can spin either way, buddy. Ben Will Goose says, hi James, on wild card, Munoz and Troffer or Senesi and Gay, cheers. Oh, Munoz, mate. Enjoy the game, Munoz. Mike says, hi James, looking at different formations on wildcard and which position my 11th player should be. Who do you feel scores more over the next 5 weeks? Burn, Enzo, or Thiago? Over the next 5 weeks? Thiago's the sensible answer here, isn't it? I think so. I think that's the sensible answer. AT17 says, do you think the free hit in 17 is overblown? Wouldn't we be transferring Palace players out by then anyway and picking up Brentford players? Right, okay, so this is presumably on a presumption that there might be 4 teams who blank in game week 17. If 4 teams did blank in game week 17, then there would be nothing wrong. You don't want to lose your Arsenal players, do you? It would be nothing wrong with free hitting in that week under that circumstance, though the fixtures aren't great in that week, it's worth saying. Yeah, I'm surprised I've not had more questions about this, but that's fine. I'll cover it tomorrow. Amanda B says, is it worth a transfer to replace Joachim Andersen this week to avoid playing Senesi, considering Newcastle defence in his place? Well, I think with Anderson, like if Marco Silva said, oh, Anderson's doubtful this week, we don't know, then probably a hold, I think, and just you play Anderson, and if Senesi comes off the bench, that's what it's for. If Marco Silva says, well, Anderson's out for 4 weeks, well, still with it and sell him, isn't it? Probably. So it's very dependent on what Marco Silva tells us tomorrow, I think. And the speculation was last week that he may even be available for this one. Staffy says, what do you think about these? Having Bowen and João Pedro, I have 2 plans in mind. First is getting Krupi for one of them and Bumo for Rangers, going for 4-4-2, 3-5-2, with Xhaka 5th mid. But Mateta will come in 12-13 for the other forward. Second is getting Mateta and Minter now and go 4-4-2, 3-5-2 in 3 game weeks and not own Bumo. There's a lot going on there, mate. If you use a wild card and you're sitting there with Bowen and João Pedro, you are probably going to get to game week 12 and want to deal with Bowen, and he then definitely gets to 13 and want to deal with João Pedro, I think. When I wildcard, I'd be very surprised if Bumo doesn't go in there. But I don't think you have to rush to go there with 2 away games coming up. Hiradi Majumba says, hi James, 2 free transfers, 2.8 million in the bank to move Gu and Rogers to Mateta and Minter. The plan is to bench boost in game week 11, bench of Dubravka, Reinders, Rodon and Anderson if fit, or move to Keane and wildcard in 13. Thoughts? You got a plan, I'm not going to tell you different, and it seems fine to me, mate. John Day says, is it worth a hit to do Pedro to Voltemade this week, or just wait till next week to bin him off? The problem with the wait until next week is João Pedro's got Wolves at home, and I don't think binning that off if you don't bin it this week. But would I take a hit to do that? Well, I've got João Pedro, and I could do that, and I won't be doing that. It's not to say I won't sell João Pedro, but I won't be doing it for a -4. Daniel Mackey says, do you agree that double chips is the best FPL rule change in years? Been generally interesting chip strategy discussion this season, and not just when are the blanks and doubles. I think it's been nice for this half of the season, but I think part of the skill previously has obviously been holding those chips for better use for later in the season. And the fact that we will all have chips for the second half of the season, idiots like me are probably going to do content and say, guys, hold your chips for April. So I do think that we might find that this has been nice, this bit of the season, where there's been lots of different strategies and ideas. But I do think we may find that it is very template in the second half of the season. It needs something with blanks and doubles that makes awkwardness and 2 different. And it did work out last year where there was kind of like 2 different paths. It might not do this year, and if that's the case, we're all going to end up on similar things, really. Remember, it's no Arseman now, right? And that had a lot to do with various strategies last year. A lot of people went kind of that slot Emery, Moyes early on, and others like me would like Arteta and Eddie Howe later on. So there isn't that to variance it up this year. So I think for the first half of the season, Daniel, yes, I agree with you. Second half of the season, let's say, I anticipate the usual moaning of everyone's got the same team. Matthew Archer says, hi James, sorry for the long one. Should I sell Richards or Senesi for Timber this week? Whoever I keep will be 4th defender and rotate. But if I keep Richards, I block myself off of Mateta for Gyökeres in 12. I don't know what other Palace you've got that blocks that off. but that would be the only reason not to say Richards. My understanding is, I saw our Palace correspondent Rory put it on the Slack that Richards is going to be available for Brentford at the weekend, is the word. So I wouldn't be keen to move him on if I owned. That's kind of like ideal as a fourth defender that you could use probably any week. Block from Mateta 12. There'll be alternatives. Do you want to sell Senesi? I mean, Senesi's fixtures from 12 are outstanding as well. I think the sensible answer here, Matthew, is probably fine, sell Richards. But if you're not getting Mateta till 12, I wouldn't rush that. Zem says, hi, James. Hope Harry is doing well. Really enjoyed your Being Dad series. Thank you, mate. Yeah, he's doing good. 7 now not now, but I'm just trying to count that 11 days is going to be 7. Where does it go? Yeah, he's doing grand. Thank you, mate. GB Fancy Football says, hi, James. Loving the pods as always. How much effect does a rival manager doing well have on the opposing club? Slot and Amrim come to mind. Is United's new resurgence doubling things down on Merseyside? I feel like we were a bit early to be saying United resurgence. It's clearly much better recently. But is resurgence right? I don't know. I'm not quite sure that's right at the moment. Ultimately, the goal is, and we always say it, as Duncan Alexander tweeted years ago, the goal in football is always to make sure that you're not the crisis club or the club that's on the back pages of the papers. Now, at the moment, that's Liverpool. A month ago, it was United. So from a media narrative perspective, yes, United doing better. Where's the media? The media have got to find their story, right? Well, it's Liverpool at the moment, isn't it? And in a couple of weeks, it could literally be the other way around again, or it would be someone else. So media narratives probably play into what we all see. I don't think what United are doing is having any impact on what's happening at Liverpool at the moment in terms of internally, or I don't think Liverpool fans are sitting there going, oh my God, Man United's so much better than us. Like, I don't think any Liverpool fan truthfully is probably thinking that right now. I think they're just thinking they want to get out their own mess. Relative to themselves, obviously. Almost Seko says, got free transfers, 1.7 in the bank. My only sort of issues are Bowen and having to start one of Senesi, Rodon, or Krejci. Would you do Bowen to Mateta? Excuse me, Krejci to Munoz. Bench Senesi and Rodon. Or roll. Thank you. Smash a like. Thank you. If Bowen stays this week, he stays next week. It's another one I can bin if I wildcard in 12, right? Bin in the West Ham. I've got 2 of them, haven't I? Feels better in 12 than 13. It's like, all right, get off them as quick as possible. Yeah, with 2 home games, I'm quite content to just let Jared Bowen sit there at the moment, personally. I'm not saying that's necessarily the advice for you. I would say, Olmo, that if you're in a position where you've wildcarded, it's probably a hold on at the moment. Philip Trainer says, hi, James, hope you're well. I currently have 5 transfers with Haaland and Mo Salah. Looking at Xhaka for Mo, I presume that's Xhaka, and redistributing funds. Is it worth it or keep Mo as a differential? Thanks, love the pod. So the answer would be an obvious roll, but I get you got 5 free transfers, so you want to do something. Difficult to say without knowing what the rest of what you've got, Philip, is at. Is there something else that needs dealing with? Because obviously moving Mo on next week will feel better rather than this week. But then ultimately, if you want to redistribute, you're saying you're not going to have Mo for that great period from 12 onwards, and that's fine. So very reluctantly, Philip, I'm going to say yes. But what I would strongly say is if you are doing that, don't just sit on the other 4. Get shit redistributed, however that looks. Doesn't have to be everything, by the way. Don't sit there with 8 million in the bank when you've got 3 transfers, mate. Just a dad posting stuff, whose question I've just lost, unfortunately. I will find you, hopefully. Just a dad posting stuff. Where you gone? Sorry, everyone. I've got you. On wildcard, Enzo Orendaya is my 5th mid. 3-5-2 with dead 3rd forward. I'm going to say Enzo at the moment, but I bet you end up with Ndai longer term. Sorry, that's a terrible answer. Just it's how I can foresee that playing out. But there might be enough gain in between now and, say, 16, 17 maybe. James Morgan says, would you move Bruno to Bumo if it were the only way to get to Mateta from João Pedro? Could also do Tarkowski to Munoz, then 2. Worth it. 4 free transfers. I think with Tarkowski, Sean Norton said this on COTC a few weeks ago, that there wasn't really justification for the money on Tarkowski, actually, in comparison to others. Not that he's a terribly bad asset, but just probably not going to be quite worth the 5.5 when you've still got like Senesi at 5.0 cheaper, and ultimately Senesi's playing in a better team that will probably concede less goals as well. I've debated with Bruno to like Sarr this week to enable me something comfortably to Munoz. That means I can keep hold of Van Dijk for this week. And like I said, enables me to play a back 4 this week and maybe just a back 3 next week. Because I'll then be able to make another move off of Dewsbury Hall next week, for example. A 1 week punt, probably on a Chelsea player, maybe. I haven't decided yet. Bruno down. Yeah, I think in my head at the moment, I foresee me maybe wildcarding in a couple of weeks with Bumo and Cunha and going down that route. Just on the money, I don't think Bruno's a bad asset at his value at all. The beauty of him over the Christmas period, he's always going to play. There's then an awkwardness further down the line of, oh shit, Bumo's gone to AFCON. How am I putting Bruno in? Like there's cons with this sort of move. Is Bumo and Mateta significantly better than Bruno and João Pedro in your team this week? Well, ultimately that will be decided by how well the 2 players you sell are doing. There's not a lot of money you need to find. Selling Bruno is always going to feel awkward, and I'm sitting there thinking similar at the moment, mate. I'm not sure on that personally. Rick FPL fan says, hi James, thoughts on Vardiol and Reinders out for Van Heck and Sarr? Good run of fixtures for Brighton. Don't expect many clean sheets. I think Van Heck, I want to say, is 5 in 6 for DEFCONs. But it has also been over a challenging spell of fixtures, so I don't really foresee that continuing too often. Not one you think is going to get you many attacking returns. I know he scored at Wolves a couple of weeks ago. I get it, though, in terms of the fixtures. Put Sarr in your team. Deals with a couple of issues. I'm not sure that significantly makes your team better this week, mate, personally. Zubi says, hello, James. What's your thoughts on the very popular João Pedro to Mateta move this week? Any reason to keep João Pedro? Yeah, there's a great reason to keep João Pedro. He's playing Wolves in game week 11. But I totally get the frustrations. I mean, the worst thing you could do is look at João Pedro's data versus Mateta. It'd make you want to make the transfer instantly. What's the value of the transfer for someone like me who's looking short term? I think if I'd used wildcard, I'd be making the move. I think there is a little bit more case for someone like me to say, I'm not sure that's significantly better over the next 2 weeks or so. That's all. But I think for most people, yeah, you're not going to get a me saying, don't do that. Hello, William Doyle. Hope you're well. James Bridgman says, hi, James. What would a wildcard 10 team look like for you? Don't know, James, because I've not thought about it, but I will put a draft together tonight and discuss it with David on the weekend or tomorrow. Chris Coots says, hi, James. Would you rather just do Pedro to Mateta or downgrade Pedro to then do Josh King to Bumo? I have Sarr and Richards and no Man United, thanks. I've seen a lot of stuff on socials this week about, kind of like having 5 midfielders where maybe the cheapest is sort of like in the Sarr Minter bracket or Enzo Fernandez and having the 2 up front. And that's fine. My preference is still the 3 up front, I must say. So I wouldn't be looking to move King on personally. I still think that's going to be largely quite useful as an 8th attacker that's never also that tempting to play. It doesn't even have to be 8th attacker. It can almost be more like 14th or 15th player, subject to how you're set. So I wouldn't be going Pedro to like Krupi at this stage to do King to Bumo, I don't think. No. Jerry Darmiu says, hello, Jimbo. Is there a cause of concern for City's attacks with the goals disparity between Haaland and the others? Yeah, yeah, we've been saying it for a couple of weeks. Like Estev, you've mentioned there in the comment. Yeah, I couldn't. You just said even Estev. But I presume that was meant to be even Estev has scored more than the rest of them. Well, yeah, that's true. He's the second highest scorer. Yeah, they've got to chip in. I might change a little bit now that Marmoush is back available because he has the capability to be hitting double digits for goals, etc. But yeah, essentially, you're in a position with City at the moment where if you keep the big man really, really quiet, which is easier said than done, then yeah, you're potentially going to deny City. Thomas Thornton says, who do you fancy as a new goalkeeper for Vicario? Probably move next week. Consider Donnarumma and Raya, but also everyone else. Cheers. I wouldn't rush to deal with that. Like, it's okay, Vic. Petrovic is probably the one that would stand out for me, but it's not this week, is it? It's probably not even next week either. It's probably like a game week 12 move, I think. And ultimately, if Tottenham did keep a clean sheet in any of the next two, there's a potential to haul. So I'd probably be looking at that, and it will shove you a bit more money. Nikolai Holmen says, play wildcard 12 or 13. Team's good. Is there a case with possible double game week and blanks to the late to 17? No, again, I mean, that would, if it did happen, that would obviously throw your fixture tickers up and kind of all over the place a little bit. That would maybe give some credibility to it. I don't think it's going to happen, mate. Anish Nakra says, hey, James, free transfers, Tarkovsky to Keane, João Pedro to Mateta, Rangers to Sarr. Do you think I should go ahead with this plan? Yes. Pearlo's Pen says, hi, James, what do you think on this? Gyökeres, Pedro, Rangers, Rodon, -4 to Gu, Mateta, Bumo, Munoz. I'm trying to look round on that financially. So we're now putting Gu in now. I bet that's using all your money, isn't it? I'll bet. Rodon is still very useful to you. Wouldn't want to sell Gyökeres this week. Pedro cuttable. I don't know. Is there a different way around that? I'm not loving it personally. Not loving it. SCD says, hi mate, on wildcard, what would your preferred 4 be in midfield between 6.8, 6 to 8.5? Thanks. Again, not thought about it, but off the top of my head, were I doing it right now, probably something like Sarr, Mensah, Bumo. Maybe take a choice on something between like Cunha, Enzo Fernandez, Gakpo, depending on moves I wanted to make later on. Semenyo would stay in there. So something like that. Those kind of players anyway. Grant Sherman says, hi James, am I crazy to hold on to João Pedro instead of moving to Voltemade, who like the structure of three strikers might not be optimal pretty soon, so perhaps João Pedro should become a cheap striker soon. If you're not sure, Grant, sit there at the moment. That might be what I'm doing. Right, I'm going to cover down to Lukey Boy 123. I can say it's a minute to 5. Jerry W says, with Palace possibly playing 8 games in 4, is there a cause of concern to buy Munoz with how he has played every game so far this season, including cup games, subbed off after 75? No. Man is a machine. No concern. CG says, evening James, thoughts on João Pedro and VVD to Mateta and Timber for free? Yeah, seems reasonable. Stefan P says, hi James, I'm on wildcard, can't decide on picking my 5th defender. Gabriel, Timber, Munoz, Tuanzebe are lots. Looking to play 3 attackers most weeks. Any suggestions? Cheers. Yeah, Yaka Bijou at Leeds would probably be my suggestion. Subject to how much money you're spending elsewhere. But I think you'll continue in the team now. You've got 2 3.9s that are going to play the majority of games, I think, moving forward and will now be first choice. So you're behind the Rodons, Alderettis, Mukelis, etc. You're picking up the next layer of 3.9s. And actually, I think Bijou might end up being quite decent. So that would be my suggestion. John Ijugu says, is Triple Palace of Gay, Lacroix, Munoz bad? I don't want to say it's bad because it could be very good, but you are locking yourself out of 2 potentially extremely good assets. Mateta could easily be the best forward in at his value, and Sarr could easily be the best midfielder around about his value. I don't think it's necessary. Do I think any of those Palace defenders are bad? Not at all. but I wouldn't want to travel up. Lukey Boy 123 says, hi James, don't usually get to watch live, so just wanted to say thanks for the content you make. It's become a real part of my week. Appreciate you, Suj, Clates and David's work. Have a good day. You're very welcome, mate. I will leave it there, guys. Sorry for those of you I didn't get to. If you want to tag me, I've got more recordings to do today. But if you want to tag me on Twitter or on Blue Sky, Planet FPL Pod, not in my DMs, please, then I'll happily answer your questions later on. And since none of you asked the real question that I assumed there was going to be loads of questions on about, will there be a double in 16 and blank in 17? Me and David will cover it on the weekender tomorrow, as well as other stuff such as some wildcard and free hit drafts for this game week. But just leaves me to say, smash a like, please, everyone. Hit the sub button. For those on the audio, a 5-star review goes a really, really long way. Please remember to be nice to each other, everyone, and play it your way. Cue music, please, man child.